It was a grey December afternoon in the Cotswolds, Gloucestershire. A light drizzle was falling on the limestone walls of our family manor house, the same property my father had purchased after the war with his savings from 40 years working in the Birmingham steel mills. I was turning 91, that 16th of December, and the entire family had travelled from London, Edinburgh and Manchester for the celebration. The smell of roast beef and Yorkshire pudding wafted from the kitchen, mixing with the scent of the winter roses in the conservatory, whilst I observed everything from my favourite armchair by the bay window. My daughter Margaret had organised everything with that meticulous attention to detail she'd acquired after 35 years working at Barclays in the city. The dining room table was set with the good Wedgwood china, fairy lights hung between the oak beams, and a 3-tiered Victoria sponge waited in the pantry. I watched my grandchildren playing croquet on the wet lawn. Some I barely recognised, they'd grown so much. James, Margaret's son, had brought his new girlfriend from Oxford. Little Emily, my son Charles's daughter, never looked up from her mobile phone. And there was Charlotte, my eldest granddaughter, 33 years old, Cambridge educated, always with that air of superiority that comes from working at a Magic Circle law firm. Charlotte arrived around 3 o'clock, driving her brand new Range Rover Evoque, a bonus from her position as senior partner at the firm. She got out of the car whilst on a conference call through her earpiece, walked past me at the window without even glancing my way, just gave a dismissive wave whilst continuing her apparently crucial conversation about a £100 million merger in Dubai. I simply shook my head and continued watching the rain fall on the garden. As the afternoon progressed, more relatives arrived. My brother Edward came down from York with his entire family. My sister-in-law Patricia brought her famous Christmas pudding that only she could make properly. The neighbours, Colonel Henderson and his wife Dorothy, popped round to say hello, friends for over 50 years. The gathering was lovely. There was plenty of food, some Elgar playing softly in the background, and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. Around 5 o'clock, when the winter darkness had already settled and the garden lights cast a warm glow across the grounds, Margaret had the idea to take a family photograph. She began calling everyone together, organising people in front of the great stone fireplace in the drawing room. Children in front, tall ones at the back, she commanded with her usual efficiency. I was placed in the centre, seated in my leather wingback chair, as the patriarch and man of the hour. Charlotte was in the conservatory discussing with her cousins, laughing loudly and gesticulating with her glass of Chablis. Margaret called her once, twice, but she pretended not to hear. On the third attempt, Margaret raised her voice. "Charlotte, come for the photograph with your grandfather, for heaven's sake. It's his 91st birthday." What happened next will remain etched in my memory forever. Charlotte turned abruptly, her face flushed. I couldn't tell if from the wine or anger, and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, for Christ's sake, Mother, stop with this nonsense." "You don't bloody matter," she pointed directly at me. 91 or 101, I couldn't care less. "I'm negotiating a deal worth £200 million here." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the grandfather clock seemed to stop ticking. I felt as though I'd been punched in the stomach. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my reaction. Margaret went white as a sheet. Charles dropped his whiskey tumbler, and even the children stopped playing. Several seconds that felt like hours passed before someone tried to break the ice. My brother Edward let out a forced laugh and said something about young people today. Patricia pulled Charlotte by the arm, whispering something in her ear. Margaret came rushing towards me, apologizing with tears in her eyes. "Father, she didn't mean that. She's had too much to drink. You know how she is." I raised my hand, stopping the apologies. "It's quite all right, Margaret. Take the photograph." I stood from the chair with some difficulty, my legs trembling not just from age, and walked slowly towards the stairs. "Take the photograph without me. I'm rather tired." I spent the remainder of the party sitting alone in my study, politely declining all attempts at conversation. I could see Charlotte at the far end of the room, now silent, staring at her phone. Not once did she look in my direction. The guests left earlier than usual. The atmosphere had become too uncomfortable. Margaret saved me a slice of cake. Charles squeezed my shoulder before leaving, but no one mentioned the incident. That night, lying in the bed I'd shared with my late wife Eleanor for 62 years, I couldn't sleep. Charlotte's words echoed in my head. "You don't bloody matter." After everything I'd done for this family, after working double shifts at the factory to pay for her fees at Cheltenham Ladies' College, after selling my collection of first edition Dickens novels to fund her gap year traveling through Asia, after all the times I'd looked after her as a child whilst Margaret worked in London, I remembered Charlotte when she was small, perhaps 5 or 6 years old. She'd spend summers with Eleanor and me. "Grandpapa, tell me the story of Peter Rabbit." She'd ask every night before bed. And I'd tell it, creating new adventures each time, making her laugh with the rabbit's mischief in Mr. McGregor's garden. She'd say, "I was the best grandfather in the world." How things change. The following day, 17th December, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I had my tea and toast with marmalade as always, tended to the roses in the greenhouse, and at 9 o'clock sharp, I took the keys to my old Volvo estate and drove to Cheltenham Town Centre. I parked outside the offices of Thornbury and Associates Solicitors on the promenade, a Georgian building with black iron railings. Mr. Thornbury, the solicitor I'd known for 40 years, received me with his usual cordiality. "Mr. Worthington, what an honour. I heard yesterday was your birthday. 91 years. Congratulations. How may I assist you today?" "I wish to change my will, Mr. Thornbury. Change everything." He looked at me surprised, adjusting his spectacles. "But you revised your will just 18 months ago. Everything is perfectly divided between your 2 children, with provisions for the grandchildren." "I know, but I've changed my mind. I want to do things differently now." I spent the next 3 hours in that office, redoing all the documents. Mr. Thornbury tried to dissuade me several times, asked if I was certain, if I wouldn't rather think it over, consult the family. I remained firm. I was lucid. I knew exactly what I was doing. When I left the office, the noon sun was trying to break through the clouds over the Regency buildings. Instead of returning home, I drove to St. Mary's Primary School in the Leckhampton area. It was a modest school, with Victorian red brick walls and a tarmac playground full of cracks, but it was there that the only thing still giving meaning to my days took place. Mrs. Thompson was in the staff room, marking papers. A woman of about 52, auburn hair tied in a bun, tortoiseshell glasses, and that genuine smile that could brighten any room. She looked up when she saw me at the door. "Mr. Worthington, what a lovely surprise. It's not the day for the children's visit." "I know, Mrs. Thompson. I just stopped by to thank you for everything you do." She didn't understand, but smiled in her way. "You needn't thank me. The children absolutely adore your visits. Your stories about the history of the Cotswolds, about the wool trade, the Civil War battles, they're priceless. You're a living treasure for these children." 5 years ago, Mrs. Thompson had appeared at my gate with a class of 28 Year 6 pupils. They were doing a project on local heritage, and someone had recommended old Mr. Worthington, who'd lived in the manor for 70 years and knew every stone of the area. I showed the children around the property, told them about the estate's history, the dry stone walls, how my father had come down from Newcastle with just a cardboard suitcase and built everything with his own hands. The children were fascinated. They asked questions, wrote everything in their colourful notebooks, took photographs with me. At the end of the visit, a boy called Oliver, thin with glasses held together with sellotape, hugged me and said, "Thank you for sharing your memories with us, Mr. Worthington. You're important to our history." Since then, Mrs. Thompson brought a new class every month. I'd prepare homemade lemonade, Mrs. Henderson would bake scones, and we'd spend entire afternoons chatting. The children called me Grandpa Worthington. Some returned at weekends with their parents to visit. Oliver, the boy with the glasses, came almost every Saturday to help in the garden. It was December now. The school year was ending. Mrs. Thompson confided that the school was organizing a Christmas concert for Year 6, but the budget was tight. The council had cut funding, and they could barely afford mince pies. She wasn't asking me for anything, simply sharing her concerns as she always did. "Everything will work out, Mrs. Thompson. You'll see. These children deserve a proper celebration." I drove home thoughtfully. The estate had 15 acres, the main house, 3 cottages I let to holidaymakers, an orchard with over 200 fruit trees, and stunning views across the Severn Valley. It was worth a small fortune in today's property market. Margaret and Charles always talked about the value of the property, about the plans they had for when I was no longer here. In the following days, I maintained my normal routine. Margaret rang several times, trying to apologize for Charlotte's behavior. "Father, she's sorry. She wants to speak with you." I always found an excuse. Charles came the following weekend with his family, brought some wine. We had Sunday roast. No one mentioned the birthday incident. Charlotte didn't appear. She didn't ring. She didn't send a message, nothing. The week before Christmas, I received a call from Mr. Thornbury confirming that all documentation was ready and registered. The new will was valid and filed. Only one person would be informed of the changes, and only after my passing. On the 23rd of December, Christmas Eve, Mrs. Thompson came to the manor with Oliver and 2 other pupils. They brought a handmade Christmas card with colourful drawings and signatures from the entire Year 6 class. Mr. Worthington, the children insisted on delivering it personally. "You're part of our school family." Oliver hugged me tightly. "Grandpa Worthington, will you come to our Christmas concert? It's the 15th of January. Mrs. Thompson says there might not be a proper party, but we'll still get our certificates." I ruffled the boy's hair. "I'll be there, Oliver. You can count on it. And there will be a party. You'll see." That evening, whilst preparing my cottage pie, the telephone rang. It was Charlotte. Her voice was different, without the usual arrogance. "Grandpapa, it's Charlotte. I wanted to apologize for your birthday. I'd had too much to drink, talked rubbish. You know I don't think that, don't you?" I remained silent for a few seconds. "I know, Charlotte. It's quite all right. So you forgive me. May I come tomorrow? It's Christmas Eve. I thought I'd spend the day with you. Of course I forgive you, my dear. But tomorrow won't work. I have an appointment in town. Perhaps another time." "Oh, right. You sound odd, Grandpapa. Has something happened?" "Nothing's happened, Charlotte. I must ring off now. The pie's in the oven. Happy Christmas to you." I hung up before she could respond. The appointment wasn't true, but I needed distance. I needed to process everything that had happened, everything I'd decided. Christmas passed quietly. I had lunch with Edward and Patricia, avoided dinner at Margaret's, claiming a bad back. Christmas afternoon, I spent sitting under the old oak tree in the garden, rereading letters Eleanor had written when we were courting. She always knew things before they happened. On her deathbed 9 years ago, she held my hand and said, "William, promise me you'll do what your heart tells you, not what others expect of you." January arrived with heavy frost, typical of Gloucestershire winters. The manor looked even more beautiful, the grounds sparkling with ice, and the vegetable garden was full of winter cabbages and leeks. Oliver continued coming on Saturdays, now bringing his younger brother, Thomas, 11 years old. The two helped me in the greenhouse, and I taught them about plants, seasons, the patience nature requires. On the 10th of January, Margaret appeared unexpectedly. She was worried, said I'd been distant, the family missed me. "Father, what's going on? You've never been one to hold grudges." "Charlotte's devastated, says you barely spoke to her on the telephone. I'm not holding grudges against anyone, daughter. I'm simply living my life. At 91, one does what one wishes, don't you think? But father, the family needs you. The grandchildren need their grandfather." "Do they need me?" I asked, looking into her eyes. "When was the last time Emily came here without being forced? When did James ring to ask how I am? And Charlotte?" Well, Charlotte made quite clear what she thinks. Margaret began to cry. "Father, she's young, impulsive. You can't take everything she says seriously." I held my daughter's hands. "Margaret, I love you. All of you. But it's time I make choices based on what I see, not what I wish were true. Now go home, it's getting late." On the 15th of January, I rose early and put on my best suit, the charcoal grey one I only wore for special occasions. I drove to the school for the Year 6 Christmas concert. The assembly hall was decorated with paper chains and tinsel. There were tables with cakes, squash, sausage rolls, everything Mrs. Thompson said they couldn't afford. She came running towards me, eyes wide. "Mr. Worthington, you won't believe it. An anonymous benefactor made a donation to the school. They've paid for the entire party, framed certificates, even small gifts for the children. It was you, wasn't it?" I smiled and shook my head. "No, Mrs. Thompson, but how wonderful that the children have the celebration they deserve." The ceremony was moving. Each child walked onto the makeshift stage to receive their certificate. When it was Oliver's turn, he took the microphone and said, "I want to thank my mum, my nan, Mrs. Thompson, and Grandpa Worthington, who taught me that the best stories are those we live, not those we invent." The entire hall applauded. Several mothers came to congratulate me, thanking me for my patience and affection towards the children. One of them, Thomas's mother, said, "You can't imagine the difference you make in these boys' lives. They don't have a grandfather. Their father disappeared. You're the father figure they needed." I drove home that afternoon with a light heart. I'd made the right decision. The manor, the lands, the houses, the investments, everything would go to Mrs. Thompson to manage for the benefit of the school and the children. She didn't know yet, would only find out when I passed. But I'd left specific instructions. Part would be sold to create a permanent education fund, scholarships for disadvantaged pupils. The main house would be transformed into a cultural center where children would learn about the region's history. The garden would continue producing vegetables for school dinners. For Margaret and Charles, I left a reasonable sum of money, enough so they couldn't say they'd been disinherited, but nowhere near what they expected. For the grandchildren, I left memories. My father's tools for James, Eleanor's books for Emily, and for Charlotte. Ironically, I left the wing-back chair from the drawing room with a note. "So you may sit and reflect on the importance of people whilst they're still here." February arrived, and with it my diagnosis. Dr. Patterson, my physician for 30 years, was direct. "Mr. Worthington, the tests show pancreatic cancer, advanced stage. We have treatment options, but I must be honest about the chances." "How long, doctor?" 6 months, perhaps a year, with aggressive treatment. "And without treatment?" 3, 4 months. "But you'll need care." I thanked him and left the surgery with a tranquility. Even the doctor didn't understand. I didn't tell anyone in the family. Why? So they'd become last-minute saints? So they'd feign a love they hadn't shown when I was healthy. I continued my routine, the children's visits, afternoons with Oliver and Thomas, conversations with Mrs. Thompson about school projects. In March, I began feeling the pain, but hid it well. I took the medication Dr. Patterson prescribed, maintained the appearance of normality. One Saturday in March, Charlotte appeared unexpectedly. She looked different, thinner, dark circles under her eyes. "Grandpapa, I need to speak with you." She'd broken off her engagement, said she'd realized many things. That she'd been an idiot, that money and status had gone to her head. She asked for forgiveness again, cried on my shoulder. I forgave her, of course, but forgiveness doesn't erase the consequences of our actions, I told her. "Charlotte, you'll learn that words have power. They can destroy in seconds what took years to build." "I know, Grandpapa. I was horrible. How can I make amends?" "By living, Charlotte, learning, being better. But some things can't be repaired, only accepted." She didn't fully understand what I meant, but hugged me tightly before leaving. It was the last time I saw her. April arrived with spring, and with my condition worsening. Mrs. Thompson was the first to notice something was wrong. One afternoon after the children's visit, she stayed behind. "Mr. Worthington, you're ill, aren't you? I can see it in your eyes." I didn't lie to her. I told her about the diagnosis, the time I had left. She cried, wanted to know why I wasn't having treatment, why I hadn't told the family. I explained my reasons, my motives. She didn't agree but respected them. Please don't tell the children. I want their last memories of me to be joyful, not sad." She agreed, but came more frequently. She brought soups, teas, stayed for hours chatting. Oliver and Thomas continued coming on Saturdays, and I made an effort to appear well, to continue teaching, telling stories. Late April, on an unusually cold morning for the season, I woke without strength to rise. I managed to ring Dr. Patterson, who came to see me. "It's time for hospital, Mr. Worthington, or to call the family to care for you." I rang Margaret. "Daughter, I need you to come to the manor. I need help." She came running, frightened by my condition. "Father, my God, what's happened? Why didn't you tell me you were ill?" In the following days, the house filled with people. Charles, Margaret, even some grandchildren appeared. Charlotte came from Singapore, where she was temporarily based. Everyone wanted to help now. Everyone was worried now. Too late, I thought, but appreciated the gestures nonetheless. Mr. Thornbury, the solicitor, visited me discreetly. He brought documents to sign, final details of the will. Margaret thought they were insurance papers. "Mr. Worthington, are you certain you don't wish to reconsider? Your family is here. They're caring for you." "They're here because I'm dying, Mr. Thornbury." "Where were they when I was living?" The decision stands. Early May, Mrs. Thompson brought the children for one last visit. Oliver had made a handmade book with all the stories I'd told over the years. Thomas had painted the entire manor in watercolors. The whole class signed an enormous banner saying, "Thank you for everything, Grandpa Worthington." It was the happiest afternoon of my final months. I told one last story about a wise old man who planted trees, knowing he'd never see their shade, but planted nonetheless for future generations. The children understood the metaphor, each in their own way. When they left, Mrs. Thompson stayed. She held my hand and said, "Mr. Worthington, it's been an honor to know you. You've changed these children's lives. You've changed my life. It's I who should thank you, Mrs. Thompson. You gave me purpose when I thought I had none left. Look after them, all of them. I will, Mr. Worthington, I will." On the 8th of May, with the entire family gathered in the bedroom, I passed. They say my last words were, "Look after one another," but only I know I actually whispered, "What matters isn't blood, it's love." The will was read a week after the funeral. Mr. Thornbury's office was full, Margaret, Charles, the grandchildren, all waiting anxiously. When he read the terms, the silence was deafening. Then came the shouts, the accusations, the threats to contest it legally. Charlotte was the only one who said nothing. She took the wingback chair that was her inheritance, read the note once, twice, 3 times, and left crying silently. Mrs. Thompson was notified separately. When she understood the magnitude of what she'd received, she fainted, then cried for hours. She transformed the manor exactly as I'd planned. The William Worthington Cultural Centre was opened a year later with a library, computer room, and spaces for arts and culture workshops. Oliver, the boy with the sellotaped glasses, received a scholarship and now studies history at Oxford. During holidays, he returns to the Cultural Centre to give talks about Cotswolds history. Thomas became a horticulturist, inspired by afternoons in the greenhouse. Hundreds of children have passed through the centre over the years, each carrying a bit of old Worthington in their memories. Margaret and Charles contested the will but lost. The medical certificate confirmed I was lucid until the end. They received the money I'd left, enough to live comfortably, but nothing near the fortune they'd expected to inherit. Charlotte was never the same. They say she keeps the wingback chair in her London flat and sometimes sits in it for hours, thinking. She visits the cultural centre occasionally, always discreetly, watching the children from afar. On one such visit, she heard Oliver telling a new group about Grandpa Worthington, how important he was, how his stories and wisdom lived through them. She cried that day, finally understanding the weight of her words that fateful December. "You don't bloody matter," she'd shouted. But I proved I did matter, not to those who shared my blood, but to those who shared my heart. The manor continues to produce. The orchard bears fruit every year, the garden feeds dozens of families, and the old oak offers shade to new generations of dreaming children. Mrs. Thompson, now director of the center, keeps a photograph of me at the main entrance with the inscription William Worthington, a man who understood that true legacy isn't measured in assets, but in transformed lives. And so ends my story, a story about choices, consequences, the power of words, and the importance of valuing people whilst they're present. I learned that family isn't just about blood ties, but about who chooses to be present, who chooses to care, who chooses to love without expecting inheritances or rewards. I changed my will in silence, not for revenge, but for poetic justice. Those who said I didn't matter discovered too late how much I truly mattered. And those who always knew my worth, who visited not for what I had, but for who I was, received not just material goods, but the continuation of a legacy of love and education. If there's a lesson in this story, let it be this: words have power, use them wisely. And more importantly, show love whilst there's time, for some silences are more eloquent than 1,000 apologies. Some wills are written not with ink, but with tears of regret that came too late. What do you think? Did William do the right thing? Did Charlotte deserve a second chance? Write your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our moving stories. If this story touched you, share it with friends and family. Sometimes we all need a reminder of the importance of appreciating our loved ones before it's too late. Until next time.